I am not the Secretary General of Interpol, although I wish I could say that. Welcome to the law school, welcome to the Franklin Pierce Center for Intellectual Property, and welcome to what I believe will be a very memorable evening at this law school. I had the occasion to spend a little bit of time with the Secretary General, and you will understand when you hear him what an extraordinary person he is. He will fill this room and then some beyond that. And I want to thank him for coming the distance he's come. He's leaving tomorrow for foreign travel, so this is not exactly on his convenient schedule. It means a lot to us that he's here. I want to acknowledge, he'll be speaking in a minute, the president of the university, Mark Huddleston. Great to have him here, and for all of you and our special guests who are here tonight as well. The Secretary General mentioned to me when I was downstairs and said, "You can announce it if you want." And I said, "Of course I'll announce it." He said, "We at Interpol would love to take an intern from the law school for the summer." And I said, "Can I come?" He said, "We were hoping it would be someone younger than you." That's an extraordinary offer. That's an extraordinary offer. So I want to thank him for that. I don't think we'll have a shortage of applicants.
Did I say for every summer?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'll be going the second summer. In any event, I would like to call upon Catherine Hedges, who's the editor of IDEA, which is a magazine, really, of the intellectual property group in this law school. Catherine Hedges is an amazing student here. Sometimes I wonder how she goes to school here and does all that she does. She's obviously quite successful, and we're very proud of her. And she's had a lot to do with Sue Ritchie and others in organizing tonight's conference. So, again, thanks to the Secretary General for being here. It's a privilege. And Catherine Hedges, please come up.
Thank you, Dean Broderick. As he said, I'm Kat Hedges. I'm editor-in-chief of IDEA, the Intellectual Property Law Review. We've been in publication for 54 years, and that makes us one of the longest published intellectual property publications in the world. It's published 3 times a year by students at the University of New Hampshire School of Law, and we take articles from all over the world. We're very excited to have you here. Thank you for coming to this keynote speech, which is the kickoff of our symposium on the global problem of counterfeit pharmaceuticals. We're hosting this interdisciplinary symposium to explore how intellectual property overlaps with disciplines to combat this problem. On behalf of IDEA, I'd also like to take a moment to thank Professor Susan Ritchie, our faculty advisor, and Doris LaChance, our business manager, for all they've done to help us plan this. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Johnson & Johnson, a corporation based in New Jersey that's made up of more than 250 companies in 60 countries that focuses on manufacturing pharmaceuticals, consumer products, and medical devices, generously as one of our sponsors for this evening. So thank you to you. We'd also like to thank the Franklin Pierce Center for Intellectual Property and Executive Director Alexandra Roberts for also sponsoring this program this evening. We couldn't have done it without them. We're excited to work with them as one of the top 10 IP programs in the country, and they have a fantastic program. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, we're really lucky to have them here. Finally, I want to thank President Mark Huddleston of the University of New Hampshire for all he's done to help us plan this program. We just joined officially in January as part of the University of New Hampshire, and we're really excited to be part of the first interdisciplinary program with the University of New Hampshire. So please help me welcome President Huddleston to introduce our keynote speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine, for the introduction, as well as for everything else that you apparently do around here. You are the Energizer Bunny of UNH Law, I think. It is my great honor tonight to introduce our guest speaker, Secretary General Ron Nobel. is the first American ever to head Interpol, and arguably more importantly, he's the first UNH alum ever to head Interpol. Ron is a graduate of UNH, 1979. We were doing the math earlier, and he was feeling bad about how old he was, and I made him feel better, I think, because I graduated a lot sooner than he did. But he was a graduate in 1979 from the old Whittemore School, now, of course, the Peter T. Paul School. And after graduating from UNH, he went off to Stanford Law School. I'm sorry you couldn't get into UNH Law, maybe next time. But he has had a very distinguished career. Since then, Ron was a prosecutor for a while, went on to the U.S. Treasury, where he was an assistant secretary and undersecretary, as I recall, overseeing the Secret Service and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and the Customs Service, and a variety of other law enforcement agencies in the Clinton administration. And then in 2000 was named to head Interpol. He's now served, he's in his third term, third 5-year term with Interpol, to which he's been elected unanimously every time, which in itself I think is a tremendous accomplishment. And he really has had a transformative impact on that agency. Ron tells the story that shortly after he was named to be Secretary General, 9/11 happened. And 9/11 changed everything for everybody, but it particularly changed law enforcement. It changed Interpol, and that really has everything to do with Ron Noble and his shepherding of that agency. And I'm sure he'll have some more things to say to us tonight about that. Ron was also, I should add, our commencement speaker in 2012 at UNH on the Durham campus. The weather was a little bit nicer then than it was today, so I am especially grateful that he was willing to put up with a New Hampshire winter and come back and join us. So with that, I ask you please to welcome Secretary General Ron Noble.
I wish Franklin Pierce had admitted me when I applied. President Mark Huddleston, Dean John Broderick, distinguished members of the judiciary, faculty, students, editors of IDEA, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The relationship between a student and the school where he or she has studied is an extremely special one. The memories and friendships connected to that experience lead to the development of a bond, an attachment, or an emotional link difficult to describe in words. Since the day in 1979, yes, 35 years ago, when I graduated from UNH's Whittemore School of Business, majoring in economics and business administration, that bond between me and UNH has always been powerful. When I'm asked, how did I make it to where I am today, or who believed in me when I was young, I humbly and honestly answer, besides my parents and brother, my professors, my classmates, and administrators from UNH believed in me, supported me, and pushed me to excel as a student and to become a better person. I simply can never say thank you enough to this great university and to all those with whom I'd had contact here and indeed throughout the state of New Hampshire for having believed in me when I had nothing and for having helped to shape me as a student and as a person. So I say to you that it is really an honor for me to be here tonight, and I would not have missed it for anything. And to be asked to give this keynote address by you, I embraced it with great enthusiasm, and it feels good to be home. Now, I've talked about my attachment and bond with UNH, but I want to turn to another kind of bond that is even stronger, and I would dare say pure. It's the love that binds a parent and a child. But why would I, as the Secretary General of Interpol, a 190-member country police organization, open a law symposium on counterfeit pharmaceuticals with a reference to the love that links a parent and a child? Out of love, parents will do almost anything possible to protect their child, to keep their child safe and healthy. When a child is sick, parents worldwide will consult a doctor whenever necessary and possible to find out what to do to help their child get better. Frequently, a doctor will prescribe medicine for their child. Parents must trust their doctor to prescribe the right medicine. They must have faith that if they give their child what their doctor has prescribed, then their child will get better. This is the world that I and most of you recognize and understand. A world where we receive the medicines prescribed, a world where parents have faith that these medicines would not be something other than that which they purport to be. A world where they would not be ineffective or create another illness, or even worse, where they would not cause the death of their children. Unfortunately, the real world in which Interpol operates and which embraces many of the 177 countries that I visited as Secretary General, it's a different world. In the real world lurk transnational organized crime groups that ruthlessly exploit the trust and faith that parents and patients place in doctors, pharmacies, and medicines. In many parts of the real world, it is no longer enough that parents express their love and care for their children by taking them to a doctor when sick and by purchasing and giving their children the medicine prescribed. Now, more and more parents need to worry whether the medicine that they are purchasing is authentic and is in fact what it purports to be. They need to take extra steps to assure themselves that they are not purchasing and giving their children fake medicines. To believe me, you really need to believe that which seems unlikely or even shocking, that there are transnational organized crime groups that intentionally produce, disguise, and sell medicines or pharmaceutical products that they know to be fake, that they do this even with medicines and pharmaceutical products created to prevent life-threatening diseases or illnesses. Fake medicines and medical products are found in each country in the world. Organized crime is involved with counterfeits of both branded and generic medicines. My experience over the last 25 plus years has taught me that many transnational organized crime groups worldwide do not care about a child's health or your health. Instead, they care about making profits irrespective of what the cost might be to children or to you. Their greed and desire for more and more money are without boundaries and without limitations. Understanding Interpol's and law enforcement's task in combating fake medicines and pharmaceutical crime is fairly clear and straightforward. It is to identify medicines that are fake, counterfeit, or illicit. Get them off the streets, shut down those entities knowingly selling these products, identify the groups and persons that produced and transported these fake or illicit medicines, and bring them to justice, so as to shut down these illegal supply chains and dismantle transnational crime groups and deter others from engaging in this criminal conduct. Unfortunately, accomplishing this task globally and systematically is not as straightforward as understanding what needs to be done. In accomplishing this task something that can be brought about just by passing and enforcing the right laws at the national level? I recognize that I'm speaking at a law school ranked among the top 10 in the U.S. in intellectual property. Therefore, it is natural that this symposium will discuss and debate how the right laws targeting medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crime and their proper application can assist society, governments, and law enforcement in their collective desire to prevent consumers and patients from purchasing or taking fake medicines, for example. But I need you to keep in mind that the real world outside these doors is quite complex. And having and applying the right laws in one country is only a small part of the solution. If you keep in mind what I said about transnational organized crime groups, you'll understand better what I mean. These groups can manufacture fake or counterfeit medicines in one country, on one continent, disguise and transport them through a range of countries over other continents, repackage and redistribute them, and then resell them in new packaging or out of the packaging altogether. Even with authentic medicines, they can repackage medicines that have expired or just remove the medicines from their packaging and sell them in other forms. They can redirect authentic medicines from the original country of destination to a different country. They can conceal or disguise medicines in violation of the relevant national law so as to avoid strict regulatory oversight. such medical products are commonly called illicit. For Interpol, the daily challenge we confront in helping our 190 member countries fight medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crimes is overwhelming at times. Simply put, the opportunities for transnational criminals to profit from the sale of fake, counterfeit, or illicit medicines and pharmaceutical products are huge. Transnational criminals are experts in finding and exploiting the gaps in regulatory regimes for such products, or the weak enforcement capacity of governments to prevent the illegal manufacture and sale of fake, counterfeit, and illicit medical products. Let me give you a few statistics to help you better understand the regulatory gaps that exist and that are currently being exploited by transnational organized crime groups. Just this January 2014, Dr. Margaret Chan, Director General of the World Health Organization, gave a report to the WHO's Executive Board, wherein she estimated, and I quote, "For medicines, only around 20% of our member states, and there are 194 of those states, only 20% have a well-functioning regulatory authority. 50% have variable regulatory quality, and 30% have virtually no or only very limited capacity." As you think globally, you can see quite easily that having as high as 80% of WHO countries with variable, limited, or no regulatory capacity for medicines presents significant hurdles for governments and law enforcement worldwide. Imagine a medicine is produced legally in country A for export to country B, but is sent to country B via country C and D, from where it is diverted to countries X, Y, and Z for sale. Imagine that in countries X, Y, and Z they have limited or no regulatory capacity, where it is not illegal to sell medicines that were originally manufactured for export to country B. Imagine a simpler case. A fake anti-malarial medicine is produced in country A. It is then transported through countries B and C until it finally ends up in country Z, where it is taken out of its original packaging, broken down into smaller units, and sold at local pharmacies or stalls and outdoor markets throughout the country. Imagine children consume this fake medicine, and hospitals begin reporting an increase in the number of children with symptoms including fever, headache, and vomiting. Eventually, children and even adults are found in comas and die. When Interpol is called upon by country Z for help, what would the crimes be that Interpol would be asked to help investigate and prosecute? Where do they occur? Where can they be prosecuted? Which jurisdictions would be willing to devote the human and financial resources necessary to investigate the relevant crimes? Could the individuals in the supply chain be identified? If so, could they be found in the same jurisdiction where the laws have been violated? Would they speak the same language? Would it be possible to establish the necessary mental state for prosecution? If so, would the crimes for which these criminals are sought be extraditable offenses in the countries where they're located? Do extradition treaties exist between the country where the criminals are located and the country seeking their extradition? Could the country seeking to prosecute these transnational criminals afford to finance a multi-country investigation, prosecution, and extradition process? Are the countries where these transnational criminals are located and our citizens ones that will extradite their own citizens to another country? Assume that during the investigation it is learned that in this country's marketplaces, one could easily purchase fake, counterfeit, and illicit medicines. And it's not even clear whether malaria was contracted before or after some or all of the above medicines had been consumed. With these questions in mind, you can see how complex it is globally to investigate and prosecute one case of fake medicines, and how difficult it is to identify one transnational organized crime group engaged in producing fake, counterfeit, and illicit medicines. There is more at issue here than having the right set of laws, regulatory scheme, and enforcement powers in one country. Even where adequate regulations exist at the national level, they present problems when one tries to enforce them across national borders, where different countries have different laws, or even no laws concerning medicines. Unless laws are harmonized, unless there are no gaps in the regulatory and enforcement schemes globally, organized criminals will exploit these gaps at their weakest points. Let me give you concrete examples where countries or a group of countries are trying to tackle a global problem nationally or regionally through important legislative efforts. In 2010, the European Union promulgated guidelines to ensure that by 2017, packaging of medication bears a security code, enabling identification and tracing of products. Here in the U.S., the Drug Quality and Security Act was recently passed in November 2013. One of its directives mandates, and I quote, "A manufacturer or repackager must affix or imprint a product identifier on each package in a homogeneous case intended to be introduced in a transaction into commerce," close quote. This would theoretically enable easy tracking and tracing all the way through the supply chain. India, the third largest manufacturer of pharmaceutical products in the world, has issued guidelines for implementation of barcoding on all pharmaceutical products intended for export. I've cited just a few examples over 3 continents to reinforce a point that is probably already obvious to all of you. Each country or grouping of countries is concerned about passing laws that first and foremost protect citizens or persons within its or their jurisdiction. While this makes sense at the national level, internationally it presents significant opportunities for transnational organized crime groups. When there are existing laws in place, they are often not enforced. This lack of harmonization means that regulatory, customs, and law enforcement authorities around the world need to become familiar with many countries' regulatory schemes and need to have tools that allow them to screen any and all pharmaceutical products to see if they are what they purport to be and are where they are supposed to be. Now think about the varying kinds of border control regimes and different levels of sophistication and resources available to regulatory, customs, and law enforcement authorities all around the world. Add the element of different languages and legal frameworks in which these customs and regulatory authorities operate. Think about it practically under the specific legislation. What is being uniquely marked in a traceable way? Is it the pallets, the cartons, the packages, the pills, the tablets, the bottles? What is being marked uniquely? Finally, think about the transnational organized crime groups that have been so successful at exporting or importing illegal drugs and are capable to use the same supply chains for fake and illicit medicines. That is, irrespective of how harmonized the laws are, transnational crime groups have supply chains that are never exposed to law enforcement or regulators. This is the real world in which Interpol and law enforcement and its 190 member countries operate each and every day. For Interpol, it is not enough that one country like the U.S. might have great laws, an effective regulatory scheme, and a robust law enforcement regime. Nor is it enough that a group of countries have great laws, an effective regulatory scheme, and a robust law enforcement scheme. With responsibility for 190 member countries to keep their citizens safe from crime and harm, Interpol needs to be concerned about all countries' laws, as well as their regulatory and enforcement capacity. But how can Interpol possibly achieve such a lofty goal? By targeting countries, crimes, transnational organized crime groups whose prosecution will reverberate around the world, sometimes one country, one case, one organized crime group at a time, sometimes multiple countries and crimes at a time. Perhaps by putting in place training and capacity building programs, by being available 24/7, 365 days a year to respond to any country's call for help, by understanding what the needs and capacities of our member countries are, all of the above. This past Saturday, I completed a 5-day mission to 5 countries in West Africa: Togo, Guinea, Gambia, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. In my 13-plus years as Secretary General, I have visited 177 countries to see and understand for myself the issues they face. When I was sitting in your seats, I'd only visited 2 countries. So lots possible after law school. In the last of these 5 countries, Liberia, the Ministry of Health had announced a major crackdown on counterfeit drug sellers throughout the country. But Liberians say they have no choice but to buy such drugs, given their low cost and availability, even in rural areas. I have seen where medicines are sold and purchased. They're often nothing like the pharmacies you see here, and probably not like the pharmacies you could imagine. In many countries, medicines can be sold in roadside stalls, no longer in their original packaging. Even where pharmacies or hospitals are used for sales, such medicines are often not purchased in original cartons or packaging. The differences between wealthy and poor countries are huge in terms of the risk of purchasing and consuming fake, counterfeit, or illicit medicines. The poor in these countries cannot afford expensive medicines, nor can they afford to buy medicines in large quantities. Sometimes the poor knowingly, I repeat, knowingly purchase counterfeit or illicit medicines. Some governments even discourage prosecution of these crimes because they consider the cost of certain authentic medicines prohibitive. If you recall my reference to parents' love for and desire to care for their children by purchasing the medicine prescribed by their doctors, then imagine yourself as a parent living in Africa. How can any parent in Africa take comfort in purchasing and giving their child prescribed medicines when they are so poor that they can only afford cheap medicines? How can they ensure that they are buying authentic medicines? A frequently stated estimate credited to the WHO, the World Health Organization, is that about as much as 30%, almost 1/3 of all medicines sold in Africa are fake or counterfeited. Not only is it about massive quantities, equally important is the type of medicines that are counterfeited and are fake. In Nigeria, for example, life-saving medicines from the majority of such counterfeits include antibiotics, antimalarials, and anti-infectives. In most countries, citizens have very few tools with which they themselves can compare medicines they purchase to determine whether they are authentic or counterfeit. The quality of counterfeit packaging has gotten so good that even experts from the authentic manufacturers themselves cannot tell the difference without testing the packaging in their own labs. You must recall that police worldwide are not specialized in this domain. One can count the number of specialized units worldwide on two hands. But one need not focus only on parents and children. Adults also do not want to consume fake medicines. I, for example, have been to 45 countries in Africa and to Nigeria on several occasions. I've run out of antimalarial medicine during a few trips. I've gotten sick and needed to purchase medicine. I've been to outdoor markets or nondescript markets to purchase medicine, and it is an unsettling experience deciding whether you want to take it or just run the risk by not taking it. As you can see from these examples, the opportunities the real world presents for transnational crime to exploit are many. And this is the world in which Interpol and our member countries must operate now. We can't wait for laws to be harmonized or for all countries to have a sound regulatory and enforcement scheme in place. There are too many lives at risk right now. So what is Interpol's approach? Interpol's approach is first and foremost about health and safety. We're interested in saving lives and keeping fake and illicit drugs away from unsuspecting consumers, even if it means we can't make cases against criminals. We think globally, plan regionally, and act locally. Using this approach, we've launched anti-counterfeiting operations and operations against fake medicines all around the world, and have done so on a consistent basis. Our primary goal with these operations is to protect the public, as I said, through seizures of fake, counterfeit, and illicit medicines, to disrupt criminal conduct by shutting down operations and arresting persons involved, and to use our operations as opportunities to raise awareness and educate the public about the problem presented by fake and illicit medicines. Through our operations, some of which have included 16 countries across Western, Eastern, and Southern Africa, we've been able to make concentrated efforts to seize counterfeit medicines and fake medicines, to arrest suspects, and to dismantle transnational organized crime networks. With each operation, we've collected more names, more telephone numbers, email addresses, business addresses, and intelligence about who is doing what and where. It has made us become more and more effective at disrupting these criminal networks and removing fake and illicit medicines from the market. Let me share just one recent example of an Interpol operation. Operation G Booyah was held across Southern Africa last October. It involved more than 900 officers from 5 participating countries: Angola, Malawi, Swaziland, Tanzania, and Zambia. 550 coordinated raids and inspections were conducted across 30 cities and different border points under Operation G Booyah in just 3 days. We checked marketplaces, pharmacies, clinics, and illicit sites. In all, the seizures of illicit and counterfeit medicines were approximated to be worth $3.5 million US. We shut down unauthorized outlets. Nearly 200 suspects were either arrested or put under investigation. Most importantly for us, we alerted parents and communities to the problem presented by fake medicines and illicit drugs, and we made organized crime groups worry whether the next operation would lead to their arrest. I could continue with citing examples, but I want to make another point here. I want to highlight how complex it is to investigate and prosecute fake or illicit medicines across borders globally. To make such multi-country operations successful, Interpol must take a multi-pronged approach. To coordinate all of our initiatives, Interpol has a dedicated medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crime unit, a team with multiple nationalities working together, ranging from analysts to specialized police officers. Our multi-pronged approach requires that those participating in operations are educated and trained about what constitutes a fake or illicit medicine. We hosted such a training in India just last October. We work closely with regulatory bodies and experts in identifying fake, counterfeit, and illicit medicines. We also organize conferences and meetings where the problems confronting us can be discussed and best practices can be shared. We held such a conference in Ethiopia just 2 months ago with the participation of 20 countries. But despite the successes we've had launching operations at the micro level, we know that the problem of medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crime cannot be dealt with by law enforcement alone. Law enforcement could never fully understand how to distinguish a fake medicine from an authentic medicine, like a manufacturer. Law enforcement does not understand the supply and distribution chains like the manufacturers understand them. Law enforcement does not have the links to medical and pharmaceutical communities like the manufacturers. We therefore needed to forge strong partnerships with drug manufacturers, both brand name and generic drug manufacturers. But there are extraordinary tensions between countries known for housing brand name drug manufacturers and those for housing generic drug manufacturers. In March last year, Interpol entered into an agreement with 29, now 30 pharmaceutical companies to foster greater cooperation between the private sector and law enforcement in fighting pharmaceutical crime collectively. This initiative brings greater focus on both branded and generic drug counterfeiting, as well as providing further impetus to law enforcement in cracking down on organized crime networks. Similarly, Interpol works alongside numerous other active players in the international arena, the World Health Organization and European Commission, to name a few. Here in the United States, we are grateful for the support of the Office of Criminal Investigation of the Food and Drug Administration. Internationally, much-needed support has also been received from entities such as the Global Fund and USAID. Now, let me give an example of how such partnerships help in practice. In April last year, for an operation in the Republic of Congo, Interpol engaged expertise from one private manufacturer in delivering a training just before the operation, and sought this manufacturer's assistance with helping to identify some of over 30 tons, it's just overwhelming, 30 tons of fake medicines seized. All such partnerships have truly helped bridge information or intelligence gaps where they exist and strengthen the cooperation across borders. But borders are no longer merely physical in our world. I'm sure you understand and are very well acquainted with the challenges I speak of when I speak about the virtual world. Transnational organized crime groups and other criminals regularly profit from the sale of counterfeit medicines online to unsuspecting, innocent citizens across the globe. They understand the ease with which anonymity can be used to commit cybercrime. And they know how to circumvent customs and regulatory authorities in many countries to deliver the possibly deadly goods to wholesalers, street traders, and retailers, or even right to people's doorsteps, all at just a click of the proverbial mouse or a tap of a finger. Interpol and our member countries have been aware of and fighting this ongoing problem on a regular basis. We've been going after them again and again. Let me share with you the continuing saga of Pangaea, a story which began over half a decade ago when the first Pangaea operation was conducted in 2008 with only 8 participating countries around the world. It was initiated with the simple aim of protecting innocent consumers from transnational criminals preying over the internet by selling counterfeit fake, or illicit medicines. In June 13, the 6th year we ran this operation, we'd gone from 8 to 100 countries participating over a one-week period. It was coordinated from our command center at Interpol headquarters in Lyon, France. It brought together customs, police, and national regulatory authorities to simultaneously target internet service providers, electronic payment systems, and delivery services. Pangaea 6 saw the support of the World Customs Organization, the Permanent Forum for International Pharmaceutical Crime, the Heads of Medicines Agency's Working Group of Enforcement Officers, the Pharmaceutical Security Initiative, Interpol, and the Center for Safe Internet Pharmacies. From the private sector, we cooperated with major payment service providers such as Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and also with Microsoft. In the virtual space, over 13,700 illegal sites were shut down under Operation Pangaea 6. On the ground, raids were conducted across addresses linked to websites. Over 500,000 packages were inspected and over 200 suspects arrested. Right here in the U.S., nearly 6,000 websites were monitored, leading to the shutdown of over 1,600 of them. This was after over 4,700 websites had been shut down the previous year as part of Operation Pangaea 5. Overall, as a direct outcome of Operation Pangaea 6, the value of seizures stood at approximately $41 million. This included confiscation of over 1 million potentially dangerous medicines. I repeat, 1 million in just 5 days. While investigations and leads generated continued to facilitate further arrests and seizures long after the operation, our thoughts also went to what if? What if those medicines had been consumed by unsuspecting innocent persons anywhere in the world? What if, even after the arrest, the shutting down of websites and breaking down of criminal networks, other criminals posing similar challenges to people's health and safety just sprang up? What if, after the seizures, they looked up different sources for obtaining illicit medicines, such as the diversion of medicines intended for different purposes or markets? Many of you might even remember one such case which saw the seizure of such secondhand drugs worth over $16 million by the FBI in Manhattan. It was in 2012 when 40 people were charged with diverting prescription drugs. Or what if organized crime started focusing more and more on citizens making purchases online in countries with fast-growing internet penetration rates, countries that might not yet have strict regulations and laws in place to deal with such criminal activity. For example, sub-Saharan Africa is one of the world's fastest-growing regions for mobile phones, internet penetration. Interpol believes that one of the absolutely necessary things to do for this fight and other global crimes in the 21st century is to innovate. I've already spoken about the importance of partnerships among all stakeholders: law enforcement, customs, non-governmental organizations, international organizations, payment providers, and delivery service providers, indeed across both public and private sectors. But Interpol wants to innovate by involving and empowering one more very important stakeholder, the private citizen. We want to give the private citizen the choice, the freedom to know for himself or herself whether what he or she is buying is genuine or not, by simply checking its authenticity. This is how the concept of ICheckIt was born. In simple terms, through Interpol's ICheckIt initiative, the aim is to provide common citizens with a one-stop mobile application that could scan products such as medicines and help establish their authenticity. This form of verification would certainly require the use of unique identification for packaging of medicines. As I had highlighted earlier, laws to ensure traceability of medical products are being introduced by a lot of countries at the national level or even at the regional level. However, multiple kinds of technologies solutions are under consideration and use. In India, for example, Pharmaceutical has already been contracted to work with certain drug manufacturers. Interpol aims not to duplicate, but only to provide a coherent platform for leveraging the existing efforts of manufacturers or national regulatory authorities. The application would help users in identifying medicines that could potentially be illicit or counterfeit. It would do so by checking against information that could be provided by the pharmaceutical industry, both brand name and generic, through the secure channels that Interpol would provide. ICheckIt would be designed for use across borders. It would give an equal opportunity to consumers regardless of whether their national authorities might have the technology or equipment to carry out expensive laboratory testing of medicines or not. Through ICheckIt, Interpol believes that manufacturers also have the option of voluntarily joining Interpol's fight against pharmaceutical crime. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, Let me close my formal remarks with the inspirational words of a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, the late Albert Schweitzer, who said, "The purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others. That's why great institutions like the University of New Hampshire School of Law and Interpol exist. This law symposium on the global problem of counterfeit pharmaceuticals will contribute to our collective desire for a safer world by helping us to better understand the problem and the myriad ways in which we can reduce the threat it poses. This is the real world that Interpol and I want us all to experience, one in which we can lead long, prosperous, healthy, and of course, law-abiding lives." Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple of questions too, so I'll point out some people to ask.
A couple of friendly questions.
Yes, friendly questions. Patrick?
I've heard that we did a class on this sort of a topic, and I've heard that the pharmaceutical trade often meshes with other criminal activities, bringing human trafficking and other criminal enterprises. Is this something that you've noticed, and is this something, how are you addressing that?
Yes, we found that the networks that are used to traffic to traffic illegal drugs are the same networks that are used for trafficking illicit drugs, counterfeit drugs, fake drugs. And that's why I say these transnational organized crime groups are really diversified criminal groups that look at every opportunity to profit. We address it by trying to link information and make connections that otherwise wouldn't be made, and try to alert law enforcement groups and customs and other agencies at borders about certain names of businesses that have been used, certain addresses and phone numbers, etc. And the goal is to try to get these entities out of primary inspection into secondary inspection where they can be more closely examined and inspected. But it's really a challenge.
Chad?
Yeah, it strikes me from some of your comments that part of the issue in some parts of the world is that people cannot afford the legal medicine. How much cooperation is going on with trying to bring pharmaceuticals to people at a rate that they can afford in parts of the world, so that there isn't this temptation to buy the illegal drug?
Yeah, that's really the challenge. And in fact, Interpol, we are not infrequently attacked because we have established a strong relationship with these brand name manufacturers, because there are countries, especially Brazil and India, where they have huge generic drug manufacturers who believe that they can sell the same medicine, the same kind of medicine that could provide the same kind of treatment for substantially less money. And Interpol, we're agnostic. We're saying that countries and persons can decide for themselves what they should take, but they should be able to take what they believe they're taking. And so in these markets in Africa, in Central and South America, we find countries like India, for example, and even Brazil, that their generic drug manufacturers are making great inroads. I might have mentioned it, I did mention it, but it probably went so fast that it might not have taken hold. But India passed a law requiring all drugs that are produced for export to be uniquely marked. So wherever in the world they're used, you can know that it's in fact an Indian manufacturer and not some other manufacturer. So we support and applaud efforts, to try to bring down the cost of medicine so that people in poor countries can treat themselves or take medicines or products that would allow them to either avoid illnesses or treat illnesses that they have. It's a very important issue.
What is it back there?
I'll call you next. Yes, sir.
Yes, beside the cost factor, the argument has been that the stronger IP in itself is a promoter of counterfeiting. What is Interpol's assessment to this argument, and is there any effort on Interpols part to give more access to medicine?
Yeah. I was hoping I wasn't going to be asked a question about IP during my presentation. When we first got involved in this area, Interpol treated the problem of medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crime as an IP crime. And we had it under the same umbrella. And we received criticism just time and time again that our operations were not being targeted to remove fake medicines or counterfeit medicines, but they were being used to target competitive producers of medicines that arguably had markings that were similar to protected medicines. So what Interpol has tried to do is we've pulled the issue of medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crime out of the IP area, I'm sorry, and it's a standalone area now. And the IP area, we sort of leave it to the institutions to battle it in a civil arena and not in a criminal arena, as far as Interpol is concerned. But it's reasonable minds could differ. I'm sure here you guys really could differ, but that's the way we approach it. Could I take the young man in the second row, please?
You're so kind. You talked about your being in Africa and running out of malaria medicines.
Yes.
And being concerned about what your options were.
Right.
And you talked about being somewhere else in the world and finding yourself sick and needing medicines, and again, being concerned. You didn't say whether you bought them or not.
I didn't, did I? No, I went to two different outdoor markets, and I did purchase them. And I went back to my hotel room, and I looked at the packaging as though I could tell the difference between counterfeit and authentic, which I couldn't. And I opened the packaging, and I didn't take it. I didn't. And, you know, no, I mean, I just, you know, and I'm very candid now. I'm very candid. I also didn't go out into any sort of high-risk areas for the next couple of days until I got back to an area where I could take what I thought was authentic medication. So yes, I'll be very honest, that's what happened.
Not to drag you kicking and screaming back towards IP, but to drag you kicking and screaming back towards IP. Just to clarify on his point and what you said about the enforcement, are you mostly is it targeted towards it's advertised as being one thing, but it's actually another? Or would it also be against a manufacturer that may be illegally producing and selling, like, let's say, Tylenol, but it is chemically Tylenol. It is what they say it is. It's just they may not have a license to do so.
So, you are dragging me back into this area. So we are focusing our modest resources to the criminal conduct where someone is selling product A but calling it product Z.
Okay.
Okay? The area that you're talking about, there have been operations we've run where the countries concerned also embrace illicit drugs, and that is where someone imports a drug saying that it's X when in fact it's Y to get it into the country, but when it's in the marketplace, sells it as Y. And so it's a different it's criminal conduct, but again, we focus on, you know, enabling consumers to purchase medicines or pharmaceutical products that are what they purport to be.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
We have time for one more question.
Before you ask this question, can I just share one experience I've had? And I don't want it to influence your question, but I've been doing this for 13 and a half years, okay? And in every occasion, when a person, excuse me, Kat, but when a person said this is the last question, and the question's asked, it's a bad question. And all the good that I might have achieved until this point is just erased. So I'm home. No, I'm home. I'm at UNH, and I'm feeling great right now. But please ask whatever question you want to ask.
everybody know, I am a plant. Okay. So what you describe seems to be such a scale to be a crime against humanity. Yeah. I mean, the scale of what we're talking about is so egregious. Yeah. It's like a crime against humanity. So my question is, has there been any move, for example, by the World Health Organization to implement an international treaty for the criminalization, to harmonize the laws so that it would be a more, because it sounds like one of the challenges is the confusing situation, and an international treaty of criminalization may be a move to assist Interpol.
Yes. So the record's broken. That's a great question. That's a great question. Round of applause, please. So I mentioned we had a unit to fight medical product counterfeiting and pharmaceutical crime, and we actually had an officer, a very talented officer, that was hosted by the World Health Organization in Geneva. We were part of this program called IMPACT, and it was really a program that was designed to fight this kind of criminal conduct. But because there was such tension between the countries that have generic drug manufacturing institutions and the brand name, the WHO is really paralyzed in terms of having what I in law enforcement call, a robust law enforcement strategy. So while in theory it would be a great thing to do for reasons that I hope make sense to you, it just isn't happening practically. And our person who was there actually got removed. So we're now in another building close to the WHO, but no longer in the WHO. Thank you. It's been a real honor. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.